Hi, hello, I'm Hope, and I hope you're all doing well today. Today I'll be reading interesting Reddit stories. Let's start by reading about the post where OP has to stay at work, which gives them an extra day off, and it's titled, Stay Until It's Done? Okay, I'm doing it by the book then, and getting an extra day off. I used to work as a supervisor in my last job and was directly working with a union. Some of my managers really didn't want to deal with things when it came to workplace injuries, so I had to deal with most of them. If you've ever worked with a union before, this is a very long and time-consuming process. While important, very tedious. So that brings us to one evening. I was on my second double in a row of 3 and very much ready to go home. As I wrapped up my area, my evening manager texted me to assist another supervisor with an injury. The supervisor was newer and needed to be taught. I informed them that I was already there on a double and needed to come back in the morning, and was there anyone else or could they help them? This manager was notorious for passing their work on others. He texted me, no, and I had to stay until it was done. Okay, I have a written documentation of a directive. Who am I to say no? Alright, well then, since I'm teaching, I'm going by the book. I opened up the union and company policy of workplace incidents and followed it step by step. By the time we got to the drug test portion, the local clinic we use was closed and we needed to call it in. This is important because if you don't use the local clinic, the out of area takes 4+ hours to come out. While that was processing, I did a lengthy investigation with the union. I spent the entire night going by the book, taking pictures and documenting everything I could. By the time I finished and the drug test finished, it was 7 a.m. and my shift started in 30 minutes. This is the time the morning manager came in. They're one of my favorites and why I pick up mornings all the time. When she saw me, she said, "Oh, you're early." I said, "I never left." Her face dropped because they have a rule that while management, including supervisors, can work more than 16 hours, if they work more than 20 hours, they need a 24-hour rest. I wasn't in a union, but still hourly salaried and got overtime for over 8 hours in a day. So not only was I going to not be able to make the morning shift, I couldn't make my evening shift either. I was still gonna be paid for both while being sent home. She asked me who told me to do this, and I showed her a message from the evening manager telling me to stay until it's finished. I went home and enjoyed my extra day off into weekend. When I came back, I had an interview about the incidents with the senior manager. After showing my messages, which the manager tried to delete, but only did on his side, I was dismissed without any issues. The manager was written up by the senior manager, so they had to pay me 2 regular shifts plus 24 hours of overtime. Needless to say, I stopped picking up after no matter how much they begged. Sometimes the managers, hell, you people in general, just need to stop and think. Hey, what are the possible consequences that my actions could bring? And then act accordingly. Obviously, not everything can be known about the futures, and yes, it is easier to look at the past events with present clarity, but we can still speculate and make informed decisions. And deleting the messages? Your manager was a complete asshole for that. This next post is just a good short funny story about taking things too literally, and it's called Pretend the Lot is Full. Many decades ago, when I was a student enrolled in a driving school, the instructor told me to pretend the lot is full and park the car. It was very early in the morning, so the shopping mall we were practicing at was empty. I knew the pretend it's full part was meant to emphasize the importance of driving slowly and cautiously and centering the car between the lines, but my teenage brain couldn't resist the obvious opportunity to act as the main character. I slowly drove up and down the lanes and around that lot for at least 5 minutes before the instructor finally got flustered and barked, "What are you waiting for? Park the car!" "You told me to pretend the lot is full." I give the instructor full props for accepting my main character humor of the moment as I watched him shake his head while his expression morphed from anger through realization and into a smiling instruction to just park the car. Wow, I can't believe I just read that. An actually good instructor with a sense of humor? One that can recognize he's done wrong and just smiles and laughs about it? Is this the American dream I keep on hearing about? The next post is about an angry customer who becomes even angrier after OP does what they wanted them to, and it's titled, "Turn my service off right now!" Okay. I work for a major cable, internet, TV, and home phone provider. That one that is probably the most hated. You know the one. No, I don't know the one. I presume this is a brand that's well known in the States, so if anyone knows which one is it, I'd be curious to know. Anyhow, the department I work in is responsible for either saving a customer or turning their services off. Call came in transferred from our tech support team, and by this time, the customer was already on the phone for an hour. Tech agent was able to get services back up and running, but he was now asking for a large credit for 1 day of services out. As soon as I got on the phone, it was demands. "Here's what you're going to do. If you can do this, then turn my service off immediately. I no longer want to be a customer." I tried to calmly explain to this very rude man I could not credit him over $200 for 1 day of service, but would be more than happy to process a credit more appropriate. He declined again and again, demanded that his service be turned off immediately. I reiterate the immediately part to him, and he says, "Yup, right now." Cue malicious compliance. I turn off all his services right there, that very second. He starts screaming that he was watching that, and what am I going to do without internet? I told him I was only doing what he asked. This ended with me restoring services and giving him a credit appropriate to his 1 day outage, which we figured out was user error on his end. Yeah, I don't know which man this plan bought, but I don't think anything is worth $200 for a day. I can see the side of, yeah, you can't use any of your stuff, so of course the compensation should be a bit more than just how much you'd pay for a day, but still, $200 is insane. But also don't be a jerk. Customer support won't be nicer to you if you're meaner to them. There is no secret discount that you can only get if you're rude to the employees. Oh, and also kind of funny how it turned out it wasn't even the company's fault. One of the commenters said, "I was hoping this ended with him using the phone services you provided to call you, so his call suddenly cuts out." And then the OP replies, "It has happened before, and it used to happen so much that they have a whole built-in system that keeps the phone active for a half an hour after disconnect." Yeah, I was also expecting the call to just stop after OP canceled the services. But alas, the company knew this kind of situations happen. Dressed overly casual at a designer store so that the rude sales rep wouldn't get commission. I don't typically buy a lot of designer clothing, but when I do go shopping, I dress pretty casually. Last week, I was strolling to the mall and there was this designer backpack on display that caught my attention. Wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans, I went inside the store to inquire about the price of the backpack. I waited around 10 minutes for someone to help me until I decided to go up to one of the sales representatives myself. She told me to wait because she was helping another customer, so I sat down and waited. I saw her in the corner of the store just standing, not doing anything. I decided to wait another 5 minutes for her to come back, but she never did. I walked back to her and told her I wanted to inquire about the backpack. I asked her if she could bring me one from the back room so I could take a closer look at it. She told me that she wouldn't be able to do that unless I was planning on purchasing the item. She seemed really annoyed with my request. Before I could say anything else, she quickly walked away to help another customer. So basically, she already profiled you as someone who isn't going to buy the backpack. How rude. Anyhow, let's continue reading this. I'm a 25-year-old woman and I could tell she didn't think I was serious about purchasing it and didn't want to waste her time. I would have purchased it then and there if she hadn't been so dismissive. A few days later, I went back into the store. This time, I made sure to dress even more casually than before. I walked in, a pair of sweatpants, running shoes, a tank top, and a zip-up. The same lady was working that day and turned her back on me as soon as I walked in. I went up to one of the other sales representatives. This guy was younger, smiling and seemed eager to help. And I told him I wanted to purchase the backpack and he gladly went inside and got it for me. He even asked if I'd like to take a look at it before buying. I thanked him and he checked me out. The store manager was also by the cashier and I let him know that I came in last week and that the lady wouldn't let me see the product before purchasing it. He was upset to hear this and told me this wasn't the first time he had received a complaint about her. The item was a few grand and all the commission went towards the junior. He was so kind and grateful. She avoided eye contact with me after she got told off by her manager and I smiled at her as I walked out of the store. Don't judge the book by its cover. Well, she got what she deserved, which in this case was nothing. Though I will also put at least a little blame on the commission system as a whole. It's so stupid. Your pay shouldn't be based on whether or not you can sell an item and for how much you can sell it. As long as you're doing your job as you should, that's really all there should be to it. And I'm not saying this just like that. I would be lying if I said this was the first time I've heard a story about these commissions turning into unhealthy competitiveness between co-workers, as well as customers that don't seem wealthy, being dismissed, ignored, and just overall being treated worse. Just like in this post. Now our next post is about scaring scammers. I think we can all agree that we dislike scammers and a bit of petty revenge is just what we need. Hi all, long-time lurker, first-time writer, plus English isn't my native language, so please excuse any bad grammar or wrong words being used. So I've been receiving calls on my landline from outside my country for a couple of days/weeks so far. The phone number calling me changes every time, including the country prefix, so they've been obviously spoofing their ID. When I pick up the phone, an automated message says, "This is PayPal. We've recognized a transaction over 499 euros. For speaking with one of our agents, please press 1," or something like that. Now, usually I don't answer these calls, but out of curiosity, I started doing it. Once I press 1 on my phone, some dude with a heavy Indian accent starts talking. When he's done with his intro, I start with something I think might scare them a bit. "Police headquarters, fraud department. What did you say your name was again?" Usually they hang up. One or two got rude, which makes me smile even more. There's not much else I can do about it because once I block a country prefix from calling me, they just change the prefix. But at least I can have some fun. Plus, I'm wasting their time. And here we have some commenters that commented on this post. My dad likes to ask them to hold on for a minute, then mutes his phone and leaves it until they hang up. 0 effort, maximum reward. Love it. That is the best way to do it. If you waste their time, they aren't making money. I used to take over the conversation with random questions. What country is this? What is the weather there? Etc. Then, after about half an hour, I tell them that this isn't my phone. I love fucking with them for a while and then I ask, "So, what do these calls do to your call center metrics when I've just wasted 10 minutes of your time?" They always get pissed off. "If you knew it was a scam, why did you waste my time?" Like, hello? I wasted 10 minutes of your time. That was 10 minutes you weren't scamming a grandma, so yeah, my time was well spent. Do you feel good about wasting your time? Again, based on my comments about keeping you off the line with grandma, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about myself. And yes, I agree with these comments so much. I mean, wasting their time really is one of the good stuff you can even do in these situations. I mean, you can probably report them somewhere, but will there be anything done about them? Doubt it. Though there are a bunch of YouTubers that troll scammers, so maybe the number isn't spoofed, or if it's an email or something like that, you can send it to them. Again, I'm not sure about logistics, but I think it's still worth checking out. Now this next post is titled Airport Justice. Not my revenge, but some justice. Well, we do love justice. I was flying solo in my early 20s at a small airport in Europe, waiting to pass through security in the early morning. Because of the time, the line for security was not too long, maybe 20 or so people waiting. I was traveling with just a large backpack. There was only one agent serving the whole line. There was a couple queued behind me with a big rolling suitcase, which they were pushing in front of them. As the line crawled forward and I took a few steps forward to close the gap, the woman pushing her suitcase rammed it into the back of my legs. At first I didn't react because accidents happen and I wasn't injured or anything. But then it happened again and again. Every time the line moved and I followed, I would get rammed by their suitcase. I wasn't in their way or slowing them down, I was literally just ahead of them in line. I chose to walk the path of peace and just tried my best to dodge them ramming me, at times just staring at them while they did it. They saw me reacting, they just kept doing it. I didn't speak the language they did, but they were basically muttering and grumbling to each other. I'm assuming they were complaining about the wait. But Jesus, hurting a random stranger won't speed things up. My best guess is that they were trying to bait me into conflict. Who knows? A few times that they hit me, I looked up at the airport agent and made eye contact. I could tell they saw what was happening between me and those assholes. Also, not one person in the line had been pulled aside for extra screening. Well, I think we all can see where this is going. It was finally my turn to go through the security. I walked through no problem, then got sweet satisfaction of watching the assholes behind me get stopped and directed into the extra full search room. In my heart, I felt like the airport agent was getting revenge for me. This was such a nice story. Even if it wasn't you doing the revenge, the justice was still served. If you're liking this video, give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe. This next post is juicy. Also really funny, so let's just read it. My half-sister wanted to show up in a wedding dress to my engagement party. So I changed the party theme so she would fit right in. My half-sister Heather and I never really got along. Also, I'm guessing it's in quote marks since it's a fake name. Really common with these stories. We're both 24. My father left my mother for her mother, and we were born the same month, 20 days apart. It has always been weird. Can we just take a second to acknowledge how shitty the father is? Like, seriously? Leaving your pregnant, I'm assuming wife, for another woman? And let's be honest, they were for sure cheating. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself, plus that's not what this story is about. It doesn't help that Heather's mom hates me and my mom. By extension, Heather and I didn't have the best relationship. She has always tried to one-up me, even though we both have a similar economic background. I can give examples of this, but for the sake of the world limit, won't write them here. So now my fiancé and I got engaged last month and had our engagement party this Saturday. We've planned it originally as a casual formal event. Nice dresses, but not I'm going to the Met Gala ball. Nice, more like we're going to a good restaurant nice. Anyway, my cousin hits me up saying she has to show me something. It was a picture of the dress Heather was going to wear. This dress, Jesus Christ, it can only be described as opulent. It was long and white, strapless with sewn-in crystals and golden accents. I'm pretty sure it's a wedding dress, but I can't be 100% sure. This made me really mad, so I decided, fuck that. I started texting people, telling them that there had been a change of plans, and instead of a casual formal, I decided to make a costume party. My mother's side is crazy for Halloween, so they were immediately on board. Understandable, Halloween is pretty cool. It's the only time of the year when people don't look at me weirdly for having horns. I told my father via text and asked him to forward the message to Heather and her mother, knowing full well that he would forget or leave it to the last minute. Saturday comes along, guests start showing up, most of them in costumes. Some didn't have time to get one. We just provided them with fun hats and cheap wigs. My dad, Heather, and her mother came like an hour late. As soon as she notices that everyone was either wearing elaborate costumes or weird accessories and she didn't stand out, she lost it. Especially when my fiancé came along and told her that her bright dress looked amazing for a cheap costume. Golden comment, you've truly picked the right person to marry. She left crying, and her mother and my father told me that I was being childish and I could have told Heather myself and not have tasked my father. Nah, you did this perfectly. You minimized the drama, had a fun party, and got some sweet revenge. Completely delete a client's company's website and email services? Are you sure? Okay. This happened a few years ago, so details are a bit fuzzy and chat is paraphrased. I was tier 2 tech support for a company that handles my country's largest internet service provider's entire professional email services, all its DNS management services, and a large portion of its website building and web hosting services. This company is tiny, minute, not even a blip in the radar, but has power that I will likely never again hold at my fingertips. One day, a ticket comes in from the internet service provider. Big client company is moving away from our proprietary email services and into Microsoft 365 or some such equivalent exchange. This usually meant I got to help the client through the processes of changing DNS records, migrating inboxes, or just backing up emails and even eventually setting up some stuff on the Microsoft side. Technically not my job, but the ISP's tier 1 tech support was woefully untrained for anything even remotely technical and terribly unprepared for most things merely commercial. And my company was awesome and treated me right. So, ticket. ISP. Client is moving from service X to service Y. Please remove their subscription from the database. Me. There seems to be some sort of a mistake, which is very common. We remove them from there once the new service is set up and running. Otherwise, it will delete everything in their subscribed package, including all email storage, DNS records, and website. You likely want to change their subscription to not include email services, but keep the rest, since your Microsoft subscription doesn't include DNS and web hosting management. And even that changed only after they have their new email service set up. ISP, yada yada, confirm. Remove their subscription. Me, are you absolutely sure? This process is not recoverable. All their emails, DNS records, and entire website, including database, will be permanently deleted. ISP, request has been submitted. Remove subscription. At this point, it's been a couple of days since the first ticket, so I call my boss. Absolutely wonderful guy and extremely intelligent, and tell him what they're asking me to do. Boss, alright, let's show them that they pay us because we know things and they don't. Don't delete the subscription, but suspend all services that would be affected. Keep those tickets at hand and expect a phone call. If they call you, tell them to talk to me. I honestly thought OP would delete everything as per protocol, but this is really smart thinking on the boss's part. God, that felt good. I mean, I felt bad for the client because their entire company basically shut down for an afternoon. But when they called my work phone directly from ISP, which is uncommon, usually just for emergencies, and the nice lady asked me what had happened, with client in that tone that says, I'm doing my best to hear all sides before making a decision, but I'm freaking the hell out right now. And I directed her to the ticket where I very clearly stated what would happen if I did what they told me to, and then told her to call boss. I felt so vindicated. Boss later told me to let them sweat for a couple of hours because the process should have been unrecoverable, and then turn the services back on. ISP was, yet again, absolutely thrilled with us, and my name kept coming up even more often as the person that solves things. Our next story is called Boss Told Me to Organize My Tools. I've been a mechanic for nearly 15 years. I'm the lead tech in my shop, and my company just sold recently to a different corporation, and with that came a new boss. A little bit of a history about the new boss. He's 22 and the son of one of my older bosses, so Everybody suspects a bit of nepotism at play. The older boss was ruthless and a jerk. It really put a dent in my confidence about being a mechanic, so I may hold somewhat of a grudge against the family, but I tried to do my best to move on and just do my job. The new boss and I have had some minor issues already in the 3 months he's been there, but I'm the type of person who can generally put my feelings to the side if the money keeps ending up in my paycheck. Today, however, that changed. I will admit, I'm not the most organized person. I have ADHD and at 33 years old, still learning to function without my medicine that I weaned off at 26. My toolbox is normally cluttered, but I keep all my tools in my area or on top of my box. It's the system that works for me. This morning, I clocked in and was about to unlock my box when the new boss came up to me and said, "You will not be working on the cars today until your box is organized." I said, "My box is organized in the way it works for me." He shot back with, "Not good enough for me or the company. I need to be able to find tools when I need them, and it needs to look neat and orderly for when corporate comes through." I paused for a second and said, "So you're telling me that you need to be able to find my tools that I have purchased when you need to use them?" I don't remember signing that agreement. He nodded and muttered something about insubordination and that he would be passing off all the work to the other technician until it was completed to his satisfaction. The amount of the audacity this boss has to think he has any say about someone else's property. It would be one thing if they were all over the place, but they're not. Okay, well, let's continue reading to see how OP employ malicious compliance. I assumed he was bluffing until 3 cars came in and all 3 tickets were handed to the other tech. I don't have any problem being told to clean up, and I would have done it his way, but I had a problem with his tone, and this was messing with my paycheck. So while he was in the back doing tire inventory, I opened the top drawer from my toolbox, spread my arms, and swept every single thing into the drawer that I could. I repeated for the second and the third drawer until the top was clean. I used the same process for both of my smaller carts until each one could be closed and locked. Then I clocked out for lunch. I'm currently sitting in my car in the parking lot, eating lunch and browsing job listings, while watching him try to open all my drawers to use my tools because 3 more cars came in and the other tech can't handle 6 at a time. Too long, didn't read. My boss withheld work to make me organize my tools his way, so now I'm withholding my tools completely. Update. I did not expect this to blow up like this. I clocked back in from lunch and boss asked to speak with me. Apparently, he called the district manager and also his dad, who is a district manager of another district, for advice, and it sounds like they both told him to make it right and that he could not afford to lose me. I know how it sounds, but it's true. He told me that he just wanted to make a good impression on corporate, who would be coming through in a few weeks, and that he shouldn't have targeted me personally. He paid me for the 3 vehicles he worked on, and I let him know that I was willing to work with him, but if he ever spoke down to me again, there would not be a do-over. I would leave. He also inquired about buying his own tools. He's not a bad dude, just a little anxious, I guess. I suppose I'll stick around for a little, as the paychecks are worth it and the drive is convenient and I have a wife and a house to pay for. As for some of the responses, yes, I am somewhat of a slob with my toolbox, but I'm also average 10 to 15 cars a day, so I don't always have time or the drive to neatly organize my tools daily. He said he'll be bringing his toolbox from home and calling or texting to ask to borrow before borrowing. I guess I'm somewhat of a rare mechanic, as I don't mind people borrowing my tools as long as they're put back. Also, the empty toolbox comments. I own all 4 toolboxes, so they would be coming with me if I left. Thanks for the support, guys. Seems like maliciously complying paid off for once. Let's hope your boss learned his lesson and won't be giving you any more trouble. Next post is called "Who is really watching the clock?" Backstory: I used to work in hotels years ago. The hotel I worked at has a policy where there must be at least one staff member at the hotel 24/7. I worked at the unenviable but fireproof position of part-time front desk and relief night audit, so I never knew when I was going to be working. 16-hour shifts weren't common, but expected of me when the main night audit called in sick. The story: I had a middle manager who got bored and liked to ruffle feathers for entertainment. Annoying, but I only had to deal with it for 2 to 3 days a week because no one else wants to cover the night audit. They also loved to sleep in and would routinely call in late in the mornings. I really couldn't stand them, but they were my boss, so after giving the essential information and passed the torch from the night audit to the morning manager and crew, I clocked out promptly and got out of the line of fire, or so I thought. I get a call waking me up at 11 a.m. because I was sleeping off my graveyard shift that night. I was told to report to the hotel for a disciplinary meeting that includes middle manager and the general manager of the hotel, my boss's boss. I asked them what the meeting was about, and they replied that it was due to my excessive use of overtime. I then asked them if I could come in before my shift that night so that I could actually get some sleep for my next graveyard shift. They replied that I would have to arrive within the hour. Took me 30 minutes to drive to get there, or they would tack on insubordination or some other nonsense to my file as well. I needed a job for rent, so I complied and got to the hotel half asleep. I'm glad nothing happened to OP, because driving when you're tired is really dangerous, since the likelihood of accidents is much higher, even accidents including death. And no job in the world is worth death. As I'm driving, I'm trying to figure out how to explain away the nice overtime additions on my paycheck. Took me a solid 10 minutes, but I remembered that the middle manager had yet to actually show up on time for the past month. That wakes me up more, and I show up to the meeting absolutely cheerful and smiling, much to the displeasure of the general manager and my boss. Boss goes on a tirade about how abusing company time is horrible in many different ways. I no longer have my eat shit in green, but I'm still unfazed by the dressing down and letting them blow off their steam that was likely put on them by payroll or HR about how my paychecks were getting too fat for their liking. This is confirmed by a shorter but more professional dressing down by my general manager about me costing the company excess money and that I should know better because I run the hotel books. I calmly state that all the overtime statements were true and that I would like to compare my punching times to the staffing schedule and the start and the end times of the people I was relieving in the evening and who was relieving me in the morning. I explained to them that I was only staying on until the next crew relieved me and I had sufficient time to brief in the incoming crew, but the corporate policy of the hotel must be maintained 24/7. They do and see that there is only 3 to 5 minutes overlap between my shift and the person relieving me. General manager looked pissed and middle manager went from smug to looking like they got their hand caught in the cookie jar, as their clockings showed usually 7ish and sometimes even 7:30 when their start time was 6. I was told by the general manager that they would reimburse me for the minutes to drive me to and from the hotel, as well as the duration of the meeting, and that the write-up was being dropped in the light of the new information. Fallout. Middle manager still made my life miserable until I left, but at least they never gave me grief about overtime after that and actually started showing up to work at 6 a.m. and not snooze until 7. My paychecks were less, but at least I got more sleep because I was now better able to beat the morning commute at the end of my shift. It kinda sucks how OP still got indirectly punished for this, money-wise. Edit. I knew my paychecks were coming in hefty for my wage. I never made a stink about staying late because hotels pay maybe 5 cents more than minimum wage if you work graveyard shifts. I kept my mouth shut about my paycheck. I needed that extra cash and dealt with the sleep deprivation for the almost guaranteed additional hour of overtime at the expense of a lazy and petty boss. I had my moment of, how do I save myself? On the way to work and was conveniently able to throw my rabble-rousing manager under the bus in one go. And someone commented exactly what I was talking about before. As a former graveyard worker, 7 to 11, it really grinds my gear when the employers expect you to attend mandatory meetings/training in the middle of sleepy time. They know your hours. Expecting employees that are coming off an all-nighter to be at work 4 hours after you've gone home is bonkers. Night shift working already screws with your sleep. I've known people that left to go home and never made it because they fell asleep while driving. Sleepy driving is equivalent to drunk driving. You don't want the female to take lead? No problem. This is a small bit of maliciousness that happened years ago, but to this day is still one of my favorite stories to tell. So there needs to be a bit of context to this one for you to understand the beauty of what happened. I was in traditional Kung Fu school for 9 years. My Sifu, aka the teacher, was one of the most honest and respectable men I've ever known. In this school, there was certain etiquette you had to follow out of both respect for the art and your fellow students. We had things like bowing before entering doorways, always facing north to take off our sash, stuff like that. Keep in mind that we weren't just teaching students here. We fostered a family and treated one another as if we were all brothers and sisters. One of the rules was that the men wore their sash on the right, while women wore their sashes on the left. I'm a trans male, and my Sifu was one of the very few people who knew this. My Sifu and I talked about it when I came out to him because I was concerned about how it would affect the etiquette of the school, and we both agreed that neither of us cared how I wore my sash, so I just kept it on the left out of habit. Very friendly conversation. At my school we did a performance every year for Chinese year called the Lion Head Dance. We would do this for restaurants, schools, or even at event centers. We even got to perform for the Chinese consulate at one time. Basically, one person is the head of the line while the other operates the tail, and we work together to cleanse space to ensure a year of good fortune for the establishment and scare away evil spirits. Everyone always loved these events, and it was some of the funniest performance I had ever done. There's drums, dancing, firecrackers, the whole deal. I was almost always in a lion with my Sifu because we made a surprisingly good team. One year, we went to this little Chinese restaurant who hired us to do our normal thing. We get there, we set up, lay out the equipment and begin stretching before the performance. This performance was one lion, with me in the tail and my Sifu in the head. As we were talking and getting ready, suddenly the owner of the establishment walks over to my Sifu and I see the most disappointed look on his face. My Sifu asks if everything is alright, and this guy just stared on my Sifu through gritted teeth. He originally asked why I was standing there, and my Sifu, while confused, said that I was his tail for tonight. The owner said that this was highly disrespectful because a woman should never be in performance and should never be the lion. My Sifu, with now a deadpan look on his face, chuckled and basically said, we don't live in the days of Chinese dynasties anymore, sir. This is my student, I'm their teacher, and they are more than welcome to perform and represent my school. The owner kept off about how it's disrespectful to the culture and how it shouldn't even be in the show because I was female. My Sifu looked back at me, looked at the owner, got a cheeky little grin at his face and said, no problem. He turned to me, grabbed my sash, twisted it to the right side, bowed and addressed me as Didi, meaning younger brother, before turning back to the owner. He had the most shocked and appalled look on his face, and it took me everything I had to not just burst up laughing. The owner, huffled, told me to just do the show and stormed off. And just as a cherry on top of this interaction, I went to get into the tail and my Sifu stopped me motioning for me to get into the head of the lion. So I got the lead show of the night, and the owner just had to sit back and deal with the fact that he didn't get his way by throwing a sexist fit. The year after, we got hired by the same restaurant, and my Sifu, instead of rejecting it, made absolutely sure that the performance that night was all female students. The owner didn't say a word. I really like this story, the sweet revenge part, since now only women were in that performance. Last story is called HR and Payroll Manager Asked to Automate Their Decisions Away. In my first job, I worked in IT as an access and permission administrator at a large company with significant technological debt. The environment included custom software dating back to the Windows 9X and even DOS era. Initially, the work was quite tedious, involving a lot of back and forth communication between multiple departments. We had to ensure that each employee had the necessary training and documentation to access data in the scope requested by their manager. Additionally, we needed approval for the manager of the department related to the system role in question. On top of that, the company's excessive paper-only bureaucratic workflow made the work go at a snail's pace. A single SAP account for a blue-collar worker required at least 3 forms signed by different people. The heads of the departments responsible for signing those papers didn't feel any urgency to send them to us quickly. A good example of this is when I, myself, waited over 2 weeks after being hired in the IT department before my first account was set up. Until that, I only had a guest account that allowed me to access the main internal website with the company's procedures, regulations, and other basic information. Up to this point, each signed form had to be physically delivered to us, which was agonizingly slow, given that the company had multiple branches. I decided to automate away the paperwork. Our first step was to allow the use of scanned documents. It was a partial success. While it eliminated the courier delays, management still required us to sign the physical copies afterwards, which we mass stamped at the end of each month. The next step was to introduce a fully electronic workflow. We faced significant resistance from upper management, so we had to settle on a system that mostly replicated the existing paper processes. Despite this, it was a game changer. We created presets that managers could select and customize as needed, using data from these customizations to create better fitting presets. We also developed workflows that automatically generated and assigned sub-tickets for necessary approval and tracked how long it took, sending reminders if needed. And finally, we got an approval from HR to access layoff data to generate user block/removal tickets. Sometime after we rolled out the new system, the HR/payroll manager made a big fuss. She was furious that her team was still waiting weeks to get their permission and questioned whether all our work has been for nothing. That really struck a chord with me. Inside, I was overjoyed, but I did my best to keep a natural expression. At that time, we were working on summary reports with burn down and bottlenecks charts. And I already knew that tickets requesting HR/payroll access were spending over most of their lifespan waiting for her or one of her sub-managers to approve them. Wait, so let me get this straight. The manager was angry because the OP didn't deliver permission fast enough while being the one causing the delay? The manager immediately went on the defensive, claiming she couldn't keep up with the amount of tickets. She then requested a change. She wanted any request from her employee to be automatically approved within the relevant scope of their subdepartment. For example, a request for an HR worker to have full HR access and limited payroll access would be automatically approved for HR access, but not for payroll, and vice versa. Automatically approving requests? What could possibly go wrong? I was skeptical, but wasn't exactly in a position to argue. I asked my boss to join the discussion and explained that the goal was to prevent overly permissive approvals that could lead to unauthorized access. I tried to convince her to brainstorm together potential edge cases before making a blanket approval, but she was already set on her decision and wasn't interested in discussing details. My boss shrugged and said it would be her responsibility. He told me to write up an official document outlining the change, and we would proceed with the implementation. The only request we had was to include a line that each such request would still be created, assigned to as normal, and marked as automatically approved by the manager's decision. I uploaded the scan into our system and, anticipating that it would eventually backfire, made a photocopy to keep it handy in the top drawer of my desk. The original copy went to the archive. A few weeks later, she stormed into our room. The speed with which she flung the door open made it clear she was furious. She demanded to know why we granted full access to payroll data to her subordinate. I think it was the only time I ever heard anyone yell in the company. I calmly reminded her of her request to automatically approve in-department access requests. She wasn't having it, explaining that one of her low-ranking subordinates from the payroll subdepartment had accessed the salaries of everyone in their department, including managers, and was unhappy with the paycheck disparity. Isn't it obvious that they shouldn't be able to do that? Well, yeah, to a human, but that decision was automated away by your request. I handed her a copy of the document she signed, which instructed us to automatically approve any and all such tickets, without exception. Immediately afterwards, she asked us to roll back the change while she wrote up another documentation to cancel the previous one. In the following days, she meticulously reviewed all those tickets and requested us to reduce access for several users. I have to admit, she did a thorough job and kept up a good pace in reviewing new requests, doing it daily instead of once every week or two, as before. In the end, we managed to distill a subset of permissions that could be approved automatically and proceeded to implement a similar approach with other departments. P.S. I didn't know whether that payroll employee managed to get the raise, but I'm sure they weren't fired, as we didn't receive any tickets to block or remove any accounts from the department in the following months. It would be nice if they got the raise, and I'm glad they didn't get fired over this. A commenter added their story. I found a list of salaries of all my boss's direct reports that he left on the copier. I discovered I made significantly less than my co-workers who had similar or reduced responsibilities and had the same tenure. I took it to my boss, told him I saw the disparity, and he needed to address it quickly. He said there was nothing he could do about it, and it was what it was. I updated my resume and started taking days off, going on interviews. When he asked me why I was taking time off, I told him I was looking for a company that valued me and paid me appropriately. He got very pale and left my office. I continued interviewing. A few days later, I received an off-schedule, very large raise. Yay! And that's why, people, you should talk about your pay. If you don't know what's fair pay, you'll have no idea if you're getting underpaid. You can click on the screen to watch another video. And thank you for watching this far. With your help, I'll be back in hell in no time.